For 11 years he stood at that pulpit every single Sunday. He baptized their children. He married their couples. He buried their dead. He counseled them through their darkest moments. They trusted him with their secrets, their grief, and their faith. And then one Sunday morning, his chair was empty. His office was locked. His car was gone. And so was everything else. The congregation of Grace Fellowship Church in rural Kentucky arrived for the 9 a.m. service to find no pastor, no sermon, and no explanation. By noon they had called his phone 40 times. By evening they had contacted his family. By the following morning, when a church elder finally broke into the pastor's office, they discovered something that turned confusion into devastation. The church safe was open, and it was completely empty. $340,000, years of congregation donations, building fund contributions, and community trust gone, along with the man they had called their shepherd for over a decade. This is the story of Pastor David Mercer, and what investigators found when they started pulling back the layers of his carefully constructed life. Welcome back to Plain English Guide, where we break down real stories in plain English with lessons you can actually use. Today's case involves faith, financial betrayal, and a man who built an entire identity around trust and then used that trust as a weapon. Names and identifying details have been changed to protect those involved. David Mercer arrived in Harlan County, Kentucky, 17 years before his disappearance. He was 34 at the time, charming, well-spoken, and deeply knowledgeable about Scripture. He had a theology degree from a small Bible college in Tennessee and a warmth that people described as immediate and genuine. Within 6 months of his arrival at Grace Fellowship, attendance had doubled. He married a local woman named Patricia within his first year. They had 3 children. He coached youth baseball. He organized community food drives that fed hundreds of families annually. He visited every sick church member in the hospital. He remembered every child's birthday. For 11 years, he was not just the pastor of Grace Fellowship. He was the moral center of that entire community. Grace Fellowship was not a wealthy church. Most of its 340 members were working-class families, farmers, miners, teachers, retirees. But they gave generously: weekly donations, special collections for the building fund, memorial gifts in honor of deceased members. Over 11 years, the church had accumulated a significant reserve, $340,000 held in a church account that Pastor David managed personally. This was the first structural vulnerability that investigators later identified. David had full unilateral control over the church finances. No co-signatory requirement on withdrawals. No independent auditing. No financial oversight committee. Complete trust because he had earned it completely. Over 11 years, not a single church elder had questioned the accounts. Why would they? This was David. Looking back, several members recalled small things that had seemed insignificant at the time. About 8 months before his disappearance, David had become noticeably more distracted. He missed 2 Wednesday evening services, something he had never done before. He seemed to lose weight. He was less present in conversations even when physically in the room. His wife, Patricia, later told investigators he had been sleeping poorly for months. One elder recalled seeing David on his phone in the church parking lot late one evening, and that David had quickly ended the call and seemed startled to be seen. Another member mentioned that David had asked unusual questions about offshore banking at a dinner conversation, framing it as curiosity about missions work in other countries. At the time, nobody connected these moments. In hindsight, they formed a clear pattern. On the morning of April 7th, a Sunday, David did not appear for the 9 a.m. service. The worship leader began without him, assuming he was running late. By 9:30, still no David. A deacon called his home. Patricia answered and said he had left at his usual time, 7:45 a.m., as he always did on Sunday mornings. She assumed he was already at the church. He was not. He had not arrived, and his car was not in the parking lot. The elder who broke into the office to look for clues found the safe door hanging open. He initially assumed there had been a break-in. He called 911. Officers arrived and immediately recognized that the safe had been opened from the inside. With the combination, there was no forced entry, no sign of struggle. The office was tidy. David's Bible was still on his desk. His reading glasses were still folded on top of it. He had left in a deliberate and organized way. Financial forensics investigators were brought in within 48 hours. What they found was methodical and deeply premeditated. Over the preceding 14 months, David had made 23 separate withdrawals from the church account, each one carefully sized to stay below the threshold that triggers automatic bank reporting requirements. The total withdrawn over that period was $341,000, every cent of the church's savings. Investigators pulled David's personal financial records and found a separate account opened 18 months earlier under a slightly different version of his name. The money from the church had been systematically transferred to this account and then moved again to a third account registered to a shell company incorporated in a state where he had no known connections. He had been building an escape route for over a year. Patricia Mercer was interviewed by investigators within hours of the disappearance being confirmed. By all indications, she was completely unaware. She broke down during the interview. Their 3 children, aged 8, 11, and 14, were told their father was missing. Patricia later said the hardest conversation she ever had in her life was not with the investigators. It was with her children that Sunday evening when she had to explain that their father was not coming home. The congregation rallied around Patricia immediately. Members brought food to the house every day for 3 weeks. Collections were taken to help with her immediate expenses. The same people David had betrayed financially showed up to support the family he had left behind. Investigators later described the community's response as one of the most remarkable examples of grace under betrayal they had witnessed in their careers. The case was transferred to federal investigators when it became clear David had crossed state lines. Surveillance footage from a gas station 2 states away showed a man matching his description purchasing fuel at 11:47 a.m. on the day of his disappearance, approximately 4 hours after he left. He was using cash. His personal phone had been turned off. A burner phone purchased 3 weeks before the disappearance showed activity in 3 different states over the following week. Investigators identified a passport application David had submitted 16 months before his disappearance under a legally changed middle name that allowed him to establish a separate travel identity. The passport was used to board a flight from a regional airport to Miami, followed by a connection to Central America. After that, the trail went cold. Federal investigators believe he had arranged accommodation and documents before leaving the United States. The impact on the Grace Fellowship congregation was profound and lasting. Several elderly members who had donated their retirement savings to the building fund lost money they could not recover. The church had to cancel planned renovations. Attendance dropped by nearly half in the months following the disappearance, not because people lost their faith, but because they lost their sense of safety in the institution that had housed it. A new pastor was appointed 8 months later. He found a congregation that was healing but deeply wounded. In his first sermon, he did something unusual. He announced that the church would be implementing a full financial transparency system, all accounts co-signed, all transactions published in the weekly bulletin, independent annual auditing by an external firm. The congregation gave him a standing ovation, not for the theology, for the accountability. As of the time of this video, David Mercer has not been found. A federal arrest warrant remains active. His name appears on financial fraud databases shared between U.S. law enforcement and international partners. Investigators believe he is living under an assumed identity in Central or South America. He has not made contact with Patricia or his children since the day he left. His youngest child recently turned 13 and has no memory of him being present for their last 5 birthdays. What lessons can be learned from this case? Trust should never replace accountability. Even respected individuals need oversight, and strong financial controls help prevent abuse of trust. Basic safeguards such as audits and shared approval requirements can stop problems early. Just as important, noticeable changes in behavior should not be ignored. A caring conversation and proper accountability can reveal problems before they become irreversible. Grace Fellowship Church is still standing, still serving its community. Patricia remarried 3 years after David's disappearance. Her children are doing well. The congregation that David betrayed rebuilt itself, not because they forgot what happened, but because they decided the community meant more than the wound. Hit subscribe for more real stories every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Plain English, no jargon. See you Monday. This video is for educational purposes only. Names and identifying details have been changed to protect those involved. This story is based on documented cases of financial fraud and disappearance in the United States.